There were more than 50 countries throughout the world fighting, and more than 100 million troops were utilized. About 70 to 85 million people suffered death, or about 3% of Earth's population at this time. World War II was a global war that lasted a total of 6 years and 1 day, from September 1, 1939, all the way to September 2, 1945. This topic matters because history sometimes tends to repeat itself, and this is evident with what is currently happening now with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. You can learn how war unfolds and how it affects everyone around the globe. I am incredible to talk about this event because I have done extensive research to learn more about the topic. World War II started in Europe when Germany invaded Poland, and today I want to share more information about this event that is a significant part of history. First, we will talk about the events that caused the war to happen. Then, we will discuss the battles that took place during the war. And finally, we will look at the aftermath of the war. I will now begin by detailing the multiple incidents that caused this war to occur. The major causes of World War II involved the effects of the Treaty of Versailles, the worldwide economic depression, and the failure of appeasement. After the catastrophic events of the First World War, the Allied powers, which consisted of Great Britain, France, and the Russian Empire, held a meeting to decide the fate of Germany. Germany had to agree to the terms of the Treaty of Versailles and was required to accept guilt of the war by losing some of its territory and being forbidden from obtaining a large army. Despite this, Hitler, who became the leader of Germany in 1933, began to secretly build an army after the economic depression that struck the world in the late 1920s. In 1936, Hitler instructed German troops to set foot in some regions of France and Austria. That same year, Hitler made alliances with Italy and Japan, who were later called the Axis powers. According to an article by the FCPS HS Social Studies written in 2014, it states that during the 1930s, Britain and France began to believe that the Treaty of Versailles was unfair to Germany. This idea resulted in the Munich Agreement of September 1938, which allowed Germany to add areas in Czechoslovakia where German speakers lived. Germany agreed not to invade the rest of Czechoslovakia or any other country, but in March 1939, Germany broke its promise when it invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia. Then on September 1, 1939, German troops invaded Poland, and Britain and France immediately declared war on Germany. This marked the beginning of the Second World War. Now that I have talked about the events that caused the war, I will inform you what occurred during the war. World War II is composed of many battles that took place in many countries around the globe, and two battles that had a significant impact were the Battle of Pearl Harbor and the Battle of Berlin. The Battle of Pearl Harbor was an attack by the Japanese Imperial Army on the U.S. Naval Base in Hawaii that occurred on December 7, 1941. Saugit Adhikari, a researcher, wrote an article published on November 11, 2021 by Ancient History Lists, stating that during the attack, 4 U.S. Navy battleships were sunk. Additionally, 3 cruisers, 3 destroyers, an anti-aircraft training ship, and 1 mine layer were also sunk or damaged. A total of 2,403 Americans died, and another 1,178 others were wounded on just this day alone. The very next day, on December 8th, the United States officially entered the Second World War when they declared war on Japan. The Battle of Berlin was fought between April to May 1945, and it was the final major battle that took place in Europe. On April 16, Berlin, the capital of Germany, was attacked by the Soviet Union. The Soviet army was successfully able to encircle the city, and Hitler committed suicide prior to the end of the battle. The city had no choice but to surrender on May 2, and on May 8, the war finally came to an end in Europe. Now that I have discussed 2 of the major battles that occurred during the war, I will now transition into explaining the aftermath of all this. Once the war officially ended, millions of people were dead, and millions more were now homeless, as countries around the world now had to find a way to recover from all the destruction and chaos. After the war finally came to an end, a meeting took place in Potsdam, Germany, to establish peace treaties. The nations that fought alongside with Hitler lost some of their territory and were forced to pay compensation for war damage. According to an article published by English Online, it states that Germany and its capital Berlin were then divided into 4 parts. The zones were to be controlled by Great Britain, the United States, France, and the Soviet Union. Many problems started to rise after the war was over. The biggest challenge was to restore Europe, which was in a devastating condition. To alleviate this issue, the United States created the Marshall Plan to support Europe's economy in 1948. 18 countries acquired a total of $13 billion worth of useful resources. A few years earlier, the Allied powers designed an organization that would ensure peace, which resulted in the creation of the United Nations. Now that I have discussed the effects of the war, I will conclude my speech. First, I talked about what events caused the war to happen. Then I discussed 2 major battles that took place during the war. Lastly, I spoke about the implications that occurred after the war was over. The invasion of Poland from Germany started the Second World War, but in the end, it was the Allied powers who were victorious over the Axis powers. Studying the past is important because it shows that history tends to repeat itself. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is something that has many people worried, but hopefully these tensions slowly start to alleviate and not mark the beginning of World War III. Thank you.